I'm going to go ahead and kick us off, I guess. And if folks are still joining, that's no problem. We'll keep rolling here. So great. All right. So thanks everybody for joining us today. I know that a lot of folks are in the middle of kind of budgeting and planning for 2021. So today we just wanted to give you a few minutes to get your questions answered. This is our first time with the virtual office hours format, so we're really excited to give it a try and see how it goes here. So just to give a quick rundown of how this will work with the virtual office hours format, we have a number of questions that many of you have submitted in advance, so that's great. We'll definitely cover those, and we really appreciate everyone who took the time to send over their thoughts ahead of time. And we're also hoping for some lively discussion today. It's a great chance to get your questions answered, so I definitely encourage everyone to speak up. Ask your questions or any specific follow-ups that come to mind as we're going through the questions here. You can share your own experiences. Anything that comes to your mind is great. If you're the shy type, you can certainly type your question into the chat feature and we'll scan through those. We'd also love it if folks would use the raise hand feature to ask a question. So that's right at the bottom of your screen. It's just a little hand. So if you click that button, we'll enable your panelist permissions so you can speak up, and you'll have the option to turn your video on if you want to connect with the group. So that would be awesome if you're willing. So just so you know, we are recording this session, so you'll be able to access it later if you like. And as I mentioned, this is our first time trying the virtual office hours format. So we'd love to hear any feedback you have on the session. The most important thing is that you get your questions answered, so don't be afraid to speak up. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us. And from there, I'll turn it over to you, Natalie.
Great, thank you, Lydia. So again, I'm Natalie Nathanson, president and founder of Magnetude. I believe I recognize many of the names on the call today, but not everyone. So hi to everyone that I haven't met before. And thought I would start with just talking, set the stage a bit with some of the themes that have bubbled up as we've been working with clients on budgeting and planning, as well as just seeing some of the questions that have come in from all of you over the last couple of weeks. And then we'll kind of dive into some of the questions. As Lydia mentioned, if you have questions you have not submitted yet, feel free to use the raise hand or the chat. Otherwise, if you see me looking down, it's because we do have a list here of quite a few questions that folks sent over when you were registering. So, I think given the year that has taken place, of course, different companies are in different, have been in different situations based on kind of industries and a number of other factors. I think one unifying factor is the need to really revisit marketing and sales strategically, and really thinking about what should change, should anything change in the go-to-market. At Magnetude, we often talk about the 3 pillars of a go-to-market with the 3 M's. We say the market, the message, and the mechanism. But I think it's a helpful orientation to think through kind of a number of these questions related to budgeting and planning. The market really meaning, who should you sell to? What are the target audiences, the roles, the company types, given kind of the pandemic and what's faced us? Should you be rethinking kind of who you go after? The message is really kind of how do you talk about your products and services? And I know we have a number of IT services firms on the session with us today. So how do you kind of position your offering? How to be clear and compelling and differentiated in what you offer? And then lastly, the mechanism is more of the tactics. So how do you reach your target market? Is it through digital advertising? Is it through partnerships? Is it through email? And usually the answer is, ideally the answer is a combination of different efforts, but really thinking about for your target audiences, what is the best way to engage them for kind of lead generation and staying top of mind for awareness and all of those sorts of things. So I wanted to start with by mentioning that. And then the other, unifying factor I think that we've heard a lot of this year is lead generation as a top priority. I think that's always been, at the top of the list, but all the more so now, where for many businesses, kind of pipelines got disrupted, typical sales cycles, may have looked different this year. So as we think about headed into 2021, lead gen and understanding the right tactics to use is certainly kind of top of mind for many folks. And I do know for a lot of companies, in particular ones that I've talked to, clients, prospects, et cetera, that maybe weren't leveraging a lot of digital tactics, or were still, were very reliant on, in-person events and things like that. 2020 started to look very different, and that's now kind of feeding into 2021 planning as well. All right, so with that, let me take the first question here. This is, actually there's two questions here that are related. The first is, what portion of my revenues should be going towards marketing? And I think, this is a topic we could, argue or debate on all day. I think there's different ways to answer and different factors involved based on, company size, the competitive landscape. If you're in a very strong competitive set, you kind of need to spend and you need to make certain marketing investments to even kind of be in the same consideration set. Conversely, if you have something that's very unique and you're so different in the market that no one knows that a solution like yours exists, you need to be kind of thinking a certain way and making certain types of investments. A benchmark we often give is that companies should be reinvesting between 6 and 13% of their revenues back into marketing efforts, and that number goes across people, tools, and advertising, with people costs typically being the largest portion of that. So that includes any kind of in-house, marketing hires or staff, any agencies like us, or consulting firms, or consultants, I mean, and then understanding kind of the tools and technologies, and then any kind of out-of-pocket advertising, like for kind of LinkedIn ads or Google ads or trade show sponsorship or whatnot. And then I'm going to take a second question here that that's related, a bit of a trickier question. And I actually don't know who submitted this, but I think I have an idea based on who's on. It's when you work with seed stage companies, is there an average percentage of funding that's dedicated to marketing? Similar to what portions of my revenue should go towards marketing, but pre-revenue, right? So that's harder because you can't give a percentage of revenues when there's no revenues. The easy answer is to say that you look at projected revenues. And in those cases, a good benchmark to use is that between 12 and 20% of projected revenues should go into marketing. But even that's not helpful because, many companies need to start spending on marketing before they are projecting revenues into the following year. So we have a few clients actually that we've worked with this year and prior that brought us in at least a year before they're really projecting at least much revenue, or they might be looking for some paid POCs at those early stages, where they need marketing to help acquire some of those POCs. They need some early marketing investments like branding, messaging, their first website. Those kinds of things are kind of the table stakes to put in place so that you can start to kind of focus on sales activity to generate revenue. So I would say for companies who don't yet have any of those, who don't yet have projected revenues, it's really often thinking a bit more project-based. What do you need to put yourself in a good position to to start selling or to complete the product development and make sure you have the right inputs. If you're talking more about market research or needing funding and you need kind of the right messaging and positioning to appeal to investors, all of those sorts of things, and really focus more on kind of the outcomes that you're looking to achieve, and then back into kind of what does marketing need to look like, and being cognizant not to overinvest at that early stage. Anyone who is looking to ask a question live, Lydia? I see a few here in the chat.
I haven't seen any come through that aren't in the chat already. Again, if anybody is interested, I'll say this again, since we might have some people joining it at different points. Feel free to use the raise hand feature, and we'll let you answer your question live. We can get a little discussion going. So I don't see anything other than what's in the chat, but everybody feel free to speak up.
Okay, we've got a shy bunch here today. Looks like I'll be doing a lot of the talking, so hope you don't mind hearing my voice for an hour. No. So another question we have here is that we're already on a limited budget, and how do we determine where to get the most bang for our buck? So I hate to give the consulting answer here of it depends. And again, if this person wants to kind of jump in and kind of add more detail via chat, or kind of raise your hand to talk about your unique case, I'm happy to kind of tailor my response. But I think especially in the current climate, everyone's looking to kind of focus their marketing efforts in the right way, and kind of really thinking about where do I get the most bang for our buck. One thing I've always said is that, when it comes to marketing, there's no shortage of places to focus on these days. It's really a matter of prioritization and thinking in terms of, of all the things you could be doing, what should you be doing? And being smart about, what are the business goals, what are the desired outcomes, and then what is it going to take to get you there? Knowing that oftentimes people think about marketing for support with kind of lead generation, demand generation, and for good reason. So that's often kind of a big focus area, but that doesn't do justice to all of the kind of benefits that marketing can bring, right? If your business has gotten very disrupted in the pandemic, or just kind of any time, thinking about that marketing lens around how do we look at, are we still targeting the right audiences? Do we need to revisit kind of how we're delivering our product or service? We had some clients at the start of the pandemic we worked with to shift their offering with services companies. Oftentimes it's a bit easier to do that because of kind of the inner workings, but we even had some clients that within a couple weeks, a couple months, depending on the client, were able to take kind of a sliver of their product and deliver it at a lower cost and appeal to a different segment of the market and continue generating revenue that otherwise they probably wouldn't have gotten. So it's really thinking about what is most important for your business right now, but also what's going to set the stage for your longer term goals, whether that's acquisition, or knowing that in a certain amount of time you're looking for another round of funding, and you need to hit certain growth milestones from that standpoint, not only kind of current kind of pipeline and revenue. So thinking in those ways as well. Another area I'll mention is messaging is always an important area to focus on within marketing, but again, because I know there's a number of IT services firms on the call today, I think there's a number of companies I know that hadn't really looked at their messaging in a while, and the company was doing well over the years, and the sales team was kind of doing what they needed to do with what they had in place. And now kind of this digital transformation that many of us across IT and marketing and whatnot have been preaching for many years, it's kind of blown up and been exacerbated in this current landscape. And so what does that mean for how, how to position the services that you can bring to a client, whether that's kind of IT services and enabling remote work, whether that's kind of securing kind of networks when you have a remote team, more usage on mobile if you're kind of a mobile development shop. So lots of different directions that could take, and then making sure that your message is, sounds and is kind of differentiated, that what truly makes your firm unique is kind of baked into that. And sometimes that's not so easy to do, right? So some of us are in spaces that are very competitive, and you really have to strategize and think about what makes you different, that the target audience finds valuable, and then work on some of the, how to best articulate that. Okay, let me go through here. Okay, so there's another question here about there's a lot of digital ads noise these days due to everyone working remotely. What are the best methods to deploy in our marketing budget in 2021? So I would say, first off, yes, there is a lot of activity in the digital ad space. I would say there's noise there, but there's noise everywhere these days. It's just a very crowded business landscape. The other thing I'll say, though, is that ads are still working. We use targeted digital advertising for our own business at Magnetude, as well as for many of our clients, and it drives good leads. It's driven clients, new clients this year. What I'll say is that, unfortunately, often digital ads are not executed the right way. One example I'll give is some companies we've had experience with will assign kind of lead generation and digital advertising to a more junior person. And even if that person is an amazing marketer, they're not necessarily the domain expert in that particular facet of marketing. So like Google AdWords, where we have one person on our team that spent the last 12 years in marketing, 8 of which were specifically Google AdWords. So there's a lot of nuances in some of these platforms. LinkedIn, it's not a difficult platform to learn, but it does have its nuances, and you can blow through a lot of money by not knowing kind of the right things to do up front. And then additionally, going back to those kind of strategic inputs that I was talking about earlier, that kind of the market and the message is, if you're not targeting the right people with the right message, it doesn't matter how good your technical execution capability is. It's all for naught. And so I think that those are some of the challenges that we see. And then the risk is kind of blaming the tactic. Google AdWords doesn't work for us, and not that it wasn't necessarily set up for success from the start. So then I think I'm advocating for kind of continuing to think about digital ads in the 2021 budget, despite the noise, but being smart about kind of what goes into that, and really thinking about those inputs, and then what are the right kinds of tactics. So I'll kind of continue talking about LinkedIn and Google AdWords here, and say that there's no one size fits all, and we have some clients where LinkedIn is a much better choice than Google, and others where it's the converse. Google is all about search, so if no one's searching for your solution, or they're not searching for anything kind of related to your solution, maybe because they don't know it exists because it is so kind of new or different in the market, that's a harder proposition on Google. But if your audience is very engaged on LinkedIn, could you put a thought leadership piece that starts to that's kind of intent driven, that someone reading that thought leadership piece is kind of self-selecting and raising their hand that they're interested in that type of solution. And on LinkedIn, you can target very precisely based on kind of the role, the company, some other parameters to really know that you're reaching kind of exactly the audience that you are. We have a client, for example, that we've been working with the last 6 months, and they're early stage, looking for more paid POCs. They were getting a lot of that from in-person events and just kind of leveraging their network and going to some of the big healthcare, cybersecurity types of kind of shows and speaking engagements and things of that nature. And then, due to the pandemic, they had to figure something else out. They're in a pretty disruptive space where, again, no one's really searching for a solution like theirs. LinkedIn has proved very effective, engaging with some really, senior titles at some pretty good name companies, and being able to feed those to sales has just done wonders for kind of what their business needs kind of at this point in time. So just wanted to give kind of that example, because yes, it's a crowded landscape, but there are there are ways to be successful with that. Okay, we have a couple here. So this one is, we have some extra budget left over this year. Any ideas for quick and effective ways to use it up before the end of the year? I love hearing that. As a business development person, no, we've had a couple companies come to us recently with end of year budget. I would say it's, there are things you can do. It depends on how much time you give yourself to look at that. One of the quicker areas to look at is content. And most companies, especially in kind of the B2B SMB market, can benefit from having more content. Especially there's almost always gaps to fill. So using kind of end of year to really think about what that is and getting some outside support to produce that, and that can only help come January to hit the ground running and have some new content assets to leverage in campaigns. Other times it's a good place to take that step back and do some kind of rapid kind of audits or assessments, and really use that to get a clear picture of where to start for January and be able to hit the ground running. Another question here. Events are always part of my budget. Should I be rethinking that in 2021? I think the short answer here is yes. But I would say to do it kind of deliberately and judiciously, and not just rip and replace. Say, okay, we had $50,000 for an event. What do we do with that $50,000? I think it's the first question to ask is like, what were those events doing for you, for your business previously? And therefore, kind of where and how should that budget be reallocated? Was it really supporting kind of sales efforts and kind of lead generation? Was it for building strong relationships with your partners and getting that kind of face-to-face interaction? Was it kind of the general brand awareness in case of like all your competitors are there, so you need to be too? Most in-person events have, or trade shows at least, have some combination of those areas and some other benefits. But I think being clear about what gap you're trying to fill, and then what's the priority, and then looking at the smartest place to reallocate that. I will say, as a generalization, the virtual booths are not really panning out the way that I'm sure the events companies would like them to, or the way that that sponsors would. There are exceptions, and there's some events companies that are doing a really fantastic job with their kind of virtual events, virtual booths. I would say where we've seen in our client base the biggest lift from those kinds of efforts this year, and for now headed into next year, is when you get a speaking opportunity and then some kind of direct access to the audience, whoever watched your online presentation or things like that, because then you're benefiting from the audience that the event producer has, and kind of as closely as possible mimicking kind of an in-person speaking engagement. I will share one example just from our own business in this area, because as a marketing services firm, Events did make up a good amount of our net new leads every year, in particular in the cybersecurity space, which is one of our kind of big areas of focus and expertise. So 2020 hit, we had a big kind of events plan and budget in place, took successes from previous years and wanted to kind of capitalize on that and do more in 2020. Went to a big cybersecurity show, RSA, in end of February, and we all know kind of what happened then. So I can say, for us, we lived and breathed ourselves of kind of how to pivot, where to pivot, where are we going to kind of fill the gap of those leads. And they were good leads because when you are at an event and you're making that face-to-face connection, you're meeting people in person that you wouldn't otherwise. So we did look at kind of where to shift and how to shift. One of the things we quickly did was kind of move to webinars. We've done a number of webinars, some ourselves, some we've done with partners so that we're benefiting from one another's audience. We've done that with a lot of our clients as well, very successfully this year. We often get the question of, webinar fatigue, and I do think there's some of that going on. Hence, like for us, trying formats like this, like the virtual office hours, panel discussions. I think it goes back to the content and not just kind of piggybacking off of kind of the topics that you're seeing elsewhere, but really trying to think about what can you deliver that's unique, that's a value to your audience, and then having a strong plan for how that will get kind of promoted and how will you actually attract people to your webinar. Other kinds of highly targeted outreach, both kind of sales and marketing outreach got moved into our mix. Investing a bit more into optimizing our own inbound lead generation engine on the website, which as a marketing firm, thankfully it was something we had always invested in, but really kind of made it a point to really figure out where and how to double down. And that was an area that as of last month, I think was the first month that became kind of our top source of qualified, so kind of sales qualified leads. So I like to use our own examples because we often tell clients we drink our own Kool-Aid, we practice what we preach, and this year certainly forced us to do that as well. I don't see anyone raising their hand to speak up, so I will just keep reading through a couple of the questions that were submitted in advance, and I think we have maybe one more in the chat. So there's a question here about what kind of growth goals should I be thinking about? That's a pretty general question, and I think marketing. When we think about growth goals that marketing can impact, we're often talking just about kind of a handful of things. Think about kind of brand awareness and brand visibility, lead generation, and sales enablement. I'm simplifying a bit, but those are kind of the bigger buckets. I think one way to think about it is to really look at what did this year look like, and then what does that mean as you're headed into next year. Obviously, the timeline of kind of the pandemic and the vaccinations and all of that, nobody knows kind of exactly what that looks like. There's also some differences in different parts of the country. So if you sell regionally versus nationally versus globally, there's different things that a company needs to be thinking about. But was your company in survival mode and is likely to need to continue that? And so if you haven't figured out how to kind of generate leads and fill pipelines digitally, I feel like that needs to be an important growth goal. Or if your target market is just still really not kind of responding the way that it used to, that might be kind of a growth goal, would be to look at a market segment that is more kind of I say recession proof or pandemic proof or whatever you want to call it, and where else can your solution fit in the market. But then I know for a lot of companies, there were new opportunities in this market. And I think a lot of, at least from what I've seen, a lot of the companies that had those have capitalized on them or have started to. So I would encourage anyone who has not really kind of put that into motion to really be thinking about it. And for some, it's kind of a natural fit. There's companies that have offers around, like COVID cleanup or kind of, cleanup services to reopen offices, management of kind of distribution of resources and healthcare and helping, with vaccinations. We have a company that works in IT services with touchless systems that kind of went through and worked with clients on kind of touchless ticketing and things like that. So sometimes the fit is more obvious than others, but going through that exercise of, where will your growth come from that may or may not be different than prior years. And then kind of putting those specific metrics in place around kind of revenue and then backing into kind of leads and kind of the demand generation side of marketing. Okay, so I see one other question here. We still have about 20 minutes left. So if anyone has not asked their question that would like to, please do that. Please do that soon. Otherwise, I'm going to take this one, and Lydia, let me know if you see any others that I might have missed. There's a question here: what should we do if we start losing business unexpectedly? We just lost a major client, so this is not theoretical. So I'm sorry to hear that. I would say looking at why, obviously losing kind of one client or a few clients that can happen at any time, and that could just be kind of usual course of business. But I certainly know there are companies that did lose kind of chunks of their client base, early in the pandemic or kind of at different points as we've gone through some different business cycles these last 9 months or so. I would say the first step is to really figure out why, and especially if that's happening right now versus at the start of the pandemic. What's happening at that organization that's driving that, and are there things that could be shifted in kind of is it the pricing model? Is it the importance of the solution? Is it viewed as mission critical or not? And really focusing from a messaging standpoint on those mission critical value props. And then the answer to that, I think, really requires marketing and sales to be in lockstep about what to do about that. And are there some kind of quick hit marketing and sales efforts that you can do when clients are looking for quick hits of what's going to drive kind of near-term effort? We do often look at things like paid digital ads or customer kind of re-engagement or cross-sell or doing something through partners. So those are the kinds of things I would look at, but that has to be in tandem and hand in hand with sales. So making sure that those conversations are happening and kind of the right plan is put forth to work across both parts of the organizations. See one other question here, Lydia. Is there anything else on your end here?
I don't have anything else. I see that last question there, but that's everything on my end. But
okay. All right. So last but certainly not least, we are considering a rebrand in 2021. How much should I budget for it? So I would say, I say this about kind of branding work and strategy and websites. You can get a rebrand for $20,000 or $200,000, and like many marketing investments, it really needs to be right sized to kind of what your company needs. I think it starts with looking at what's driving that rebrand. Is it just that your current brand looks kind of dated and you feel like doesn't give you, doesn't do justice to the product or service that you offer, or just looks a bit dated? That's kind of that's one area. Other times, like we're brought in for a rebrand because a company is looking to start acquiring a number of different companies and really like accelerate their growth trajectory. That's a different kind of rebrand because you don't want to think just about kind of up leveling and like a refresh of what you do now, but you want to be thinking about kind of positioning the company for where you want to take it, and how does that brand come across to not only to prospects and customers, but also to the companies that that you're looking to acquire, or investors if you're kind of raising funds in parallel to support that. So thinking about all the different stakeholders, and then is it truly kind of just a rebrand? And I shouldn't say just a rebrand, but are there other things involved? Do you need to revisit company positioning? Do you need to revisit the messaging? Do you have kind of a good, marketing plan or go-to-market plan that goes along with kind of sharing that out to the world once you've kind of gone through that branding? So I think those are kind of some of the factors to consider. For that, and I think a number of these questions, I'm certainly happy to follow up and answer any specific situations that anyone's kind of thinking about or trying to plan around, to make sure that we're giving you what you need. I think the focus for today and the goal was really to answer everyone's questions about budgeting and planning. I think there were some great questions here. So I appreciate the ones that everyone has shared, and certainly, as we said, happy to answer any others. So I think with that, we can wrap up, and wanted to thank everyone for their time today, and good to connect with you, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, everyone.